Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, just wanted to give you a quick little message of one of my favorite new product lines out there. Ideal for the low carb athlete to fuel before, during, and after your workouts. This company is called Equip Foods. Equip is one of my favorite supplement brands as they provide some of the shortest ingredients lists in the industry, which is hard to find, with products made from 100% real food, no junk, no chemicals, no artificial flavors or fillers. Their best seller is what I've been using, the Chocolate Prime Protein, which is actually a grass-fed beef protein powder providing a whopping 21 grams of complete protein in each scoop with only 3 ingredients. And you don't even taste them. Grass-fed beef protein, stevia, and cocoa. Now, don't worry, despite its simplicity, it does taste incredible. Not like beef. That would not taste good in my shake. Equip also has a 1-ingredient collagen powder made from grass-fed bovine collagen, providing incredible benefits for your joint health, skin, and recovery. Plus more, ideal for the aging athlete. Equip is currently having its biggest sale of the year to date, so if you're interested in checking out Prime Protein, collagen, or any of their other products, as I like the pre-workout WOD before my strength training sessions, get up to 25% off. Head to equipfoods.com/lowcarbathlete. So you can use your code lowcarbathlete and get a deal. Enjoy. Hey gang, it's Debbie, and I just wanted to give you a little overview of the amazing person I am talking to today. It's Paul Laursen. He is a co-founder and CEO of Athletica and HIIT Science, but you may have heard of him over the years in our endurance world, as he has done so much, contributed so much research and evidence of HIIT Science, heart rate variability training, and so much more with the Paul Laursen's work with Dr. Dan Plews, with Dr. Maffetone, and they have given us so much information and influenced how I think and coach my athletes. Paul has more than 30 years of experience as an athlete coach and scientist. He's published over 140 referred manuscripts, has more than 14,000 citations, and is a co-founder and CEO, as I said, of this new program, Athletica, I'm playing with some of my coaching clients. And if you haven't looked at his HIIT Science information, his program's pretty cool, HIIT Science.com. Paul remains active in the research through his business work, as well as through basic science research in his role as an Adjunct Professor at AUT University in New Zealand. He was a former lead performance physiologist for High Performance Sport New Zealand for London and Rio Olympic cycles, and he is a lifelong athlete, having now completed in 18 Ironman triathlons. So Paul and I, as I said, talked to him, right after COVID, or right before COVID started in 2020. We did the Fat Adapted Athlete Seminar in Ironman Hawaii 2019 in that October. And I'm really looking forward to organizing something again in 2023. That sounds so space age, but suddenly next year is 2023. So next year in Ironman Hawaii, I'd love to do a meetup with the Low Carb Athlete community and work with S Fuels and Paul Laursen and Dan Plews and see what we can put together in this industry, as endurance sports are burning fat. You should be training your fat aerobic development engine. We want to still do some HIIT training, as Paul talks about in his HIITscience.com. And I like that polarized training that you're doing 80% of your training in low intensity heart rate, building that aerobic engine, building that ability to burn more fat at higher heart rates for longer. And then 20% of that time, once you are a fat adapted athlete, add in that 20% HIIT training once you built that foundation up. So let's talk to Paul Laursen and see what he's up to and ask him some questions on training and fueling and nutrition and for the low carb athlete, or should we be low carb when we carb timing? Remember, when I say low carb athlete, doesn't mean zero carbs. And I'm trying to give more education on strategic carb timing, matching your nutrition, your fueling with your training and racing. And as I do some continuing education programs with Dr. Dan Plews on his Endure IQ, I'm sharing that information. And on my social media, I've been trying to be better at doing videos. I'm not a big, consistent fan of social media. I think it's exhausting to me. But once I feel inspired, I'll share little video clips here and there on my strategies that work for me. But remember, I'm not you. We're all different. So it's kind of just example of what works for me that you can try yourself. But fueling, training, and performing your best in life and in sports. And as we train for races this year, we want to also look at training for our future self. How do you want to be living your life when you are 80, 90 years old? So we need to take that into account now and look at the elements of the holistic method. So let's hear the thoughts and experiences from Paul Laursen. Hey friends, it's Debbie, the host of the Low Carb Athlete, and I'm excited to get back to my roots, talking more about metabolic efficiency and HIIT science and the fat adapted athlete and fasted exercise, or do we eat before exercise? I'm going to dive into this a lot, as I have already this year, 2022, and really focus on training and fueling, how to match your fueling with your training program, because it's different for each person. And we are hearing a lot more about fasted exercise. I've done it for a very long time, and how it could be a stressor to you. When do we add in pre-workout fuel to optimize your fat oxidation, and when should we add in carbs? So strategic carb timing, we want to burn fat, obviously, but we want to still have metabolic flexibility to be fat burning, and then have the backup fuel tank as our carbs. So that will be our rocket fuel, as in the end of a race where you want to sprint to the finish line, or you're going a shorter race, you're going higher intensity, that you're burning muscle glycogen and some fat, but you're still needing to have strong metabolism for fat metabolism, fat oxidizer, and then be able to switch back to carbs when we need them when we're racing. So we talk about training low carbohydrate, racing high. And I just spoke at KetoCon conference this past weekend. And note, I'm a little sleepy because I had a flight home last night. It was delayed and I need my sleep. I'm a lion chronotype, so I need to get to bed 8:00 at night, because I wake up, no matter what time I go to bed, I still wake up at 5 a.m. So I am focused today to talk to Paul Laursen. We did a seminar, the last Ironman Hawaii 2019. I organized a low carb athlete seminar. We called it the fat adapted athlete, but should have been simple as low carb athlete. But you want to be a fat adapted athlete when you are an endurance athlete, not be a sugar burner, because we know now that all the GI stress and fueling issues, you have to take in so much stuff, and it's just easier to be fat adapted, and it's better for longevity in your cells. So Paul, we have him back on the show. It's been, I think I spoke to him 2020. We did a podcast. So it's been 2 years, but let me give you a rundown on his bio, because he's a brilliant PhD. He's a co-founder CEO of Athletica, and he's behind HIIT Science. So obviously we're going to talk about HIIT training and maffetone training type of style, the low heart rate, when to add in HIIT training. So he has brilliant researcher, 30 years of experience as an athlete, coach, and scientist. He's published over 140 manuscripts, 14,000 citations, and is a founder of the parent company HIIT Science. Paul remains active in research through both Athletica and the basic science research through the Adjunct Professor role at AUT University, New Zealand. And he was a former lead performance physiologist for high performance sport New Zealand for London and Rio Olympic cycles, and is now a lifelong athlete, or has been a lifelong athlete, not now, but always has been, and has competed in 18 Ironmans himself. So we hung out in Kona a few years ago, and looking forward to organizing a summit at our house in San Diego this fall with S Fuels and Paleo Valley. And we are going to connect everyone down in North San Diego area and have a fun October this fall, have a low carb athlete meetup here, meetup, MEAT. So we'll do big barbecue. And then next year, 2023, I'll attempt to organize another low carb athlete meetup and kind of a seminar in Ironman Hawaii Kona next October when it's not so insane as this October. I'm staying away because it's going to be crazy having a race for the female triathletes on Thursday, and then they're doing the men's race on Saturday. So I'm not going this year. It's going to be crazy, but us Fuels will be there. So let's talk to Paul Laursen. And then I would love for you guys to send in your questions, because I know at the KetoCon conference, I had only 40 minutes to give a presentation on fueling and training the low carb athlete. And that's not enough time. So I'm going to do more Q&A sessions, just me talking to you on the podcast and my YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete. And then I'm going to start recording. Well, I did the first part of my presentation because there's a reason I say less is more as my mantra, because I tend to do more. More is not better, right? So I'm all about, making sure I can be efficient and really manage the minimal dose effect of things and how to take all this information and break it up, because I didn't know how to put it into one seminar and I didn't know what to cut out. So I have a huge presentation on fueling and training tips for the low carb athlete that I'll be dropping into YouTube, and then I'll make an effort to put them onto the audio version into the podcast on a Thursday. So I haven't done a solo podcast for a long time, because I think most of you like me talking to a guest and not me blabbing as I do in the intros sometimes. So I want to hear from you. I know I had some questions about marathon training, half marathon training, fueling for those events as a fat adapted low carb athlete. And when do you add in carbs or do you not add in carbs? It depends. So it's really hard to talk about those or answer those questions in my seminar yesterday, because it depends on your intensity. It depends where you are now. So it's very individualized, and I don't have a one size fits all approach, but we have kind of a template that we'll talk about. And Dr. Dan Plouz, I'm doing his Endure coaching program and trying to work with him and work with S Fuels to bring in our community together so we can learn and grow and really figure out a personalized coaching program for you as an endurance athlete and how to best fit in that nutrition plan and that training plan and your racing plan. The holistic method, though, remember, my focus is coaching the whole athlete from the inside out to be fit and healthy from the inside out. So we want to make sure it's not just nutrition and exercise, which led me down 10 years ago to focus on the holistic method, 8 elements to get my athlete clients to do their best of those 8 elements. So here's Paul. I'm going to bring him in and we'll talk to you a little bit more what Paul has to say. Hold on. All right, guys, I've got Paul Laursen on the show to dive into what you guys are always asking us about is, when to fast, when to eat, when to do HIIT training, when to just stay with Maffetone type of max aerobic function heart rate. We all want to be burning fat fuel and working on improved performance and hopefully longevity that's what I keep saying. I'm training my future self when I'm 80, 90 years old right now, not my race. I'm not doing any races right now, but I'm racing for my life. So Paul, thanks for coming on and diving in. As I said, just in my intro is that we just got back last night from KetoCon and talking to Zach Bitter and S Fuels and talking to the guys from Endure. So it was kind of perfect timing to have you on the show to talk about your science and what's going on in your world. So thank you.
Awesome, Deb. Well, hey, great to be here as always. And yeah, excited to have a good chat on these things. It's cool.
So it's funny. I was just talking all weekend and in the intro that we had our fat adapted seminar in Ironman Hawaii 2019. And I was telling Leighton of S Fuels that we should do one next year. Cause it's what's happened since 2019. Haven't you seen a growth of interest in low carb fueling for endurance athletes? Have you seen a change?
Well, I don't know if I've seen necessarily any sort of change personally. I'm I'm into my own little world with HIIT Science. I mean, I don't know if it's increasing or not necessarily. I don't have any sort of stats on that. I think there's always a bit of a general interest. I was just speaking with Phil Maftone yesterday, and he, I had him on my podcast, and he was talking about how there's really been a large, call it a weight gain, a fat gain over the whole pandemic thing. So it's certainly something that people should be paying attention to, especially if they're trying to lose some of that excess fat that may have accumulated during the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Last time we podcasted was the beginning of the pandemic. Now it's kind of the end of it. It's like, it's been 2+ years since we had you on. So speaking of HIIT Science, and Maftone, it's a good way to get started. We always talk about endurance training, train low, race high, and, doing the Maffetone type of training, which is max aerobic function heart rate, and tie in kind of what you teach people and what you talk about in your podcast and with your clients. How do we want to get faster with like incorporating HIIT Science, HIIT training for the aging endurance athlete?
Yeah. So, the first thing is like, there's really, I believe in both worlds. Like you need to, like everything sort of has a place. And that's why I always say like context is really key, right? So, but one of the things that we should always look at first is that we should have that aerobic foundation. I'm reflecting on the conversation I had with Phil, and oftentimes we will see, and I'm sure you will come across these athletes too, where they start out, they're wearing a heart rate monitor, and they might start with doing a lap on the track, and their heart rate just all of a sudden goes through the roof, right? It just goes sky high, and it's just that's a telltale sign that their physiology is not adapted yet to probably burning fat as a fuel, and the body's really stressed, right? It works really, really hard to try to meet the physical demand. So that's not a good thing. If we're just doing an easy lap, whether it's walking or jogging on the track, heart rate should just kind of, hover up around, 110, 120, 130 kind of thing. That's kind of more of that aerobic heart rate is where it should sort of be. And if you don't have that as a fundamental first and foremost, well, you need to kind of shift gears, and we need to get that fat burning engine firing up first and foremost before we move into the HIIT sort of training. HIIT has its place. It's when our engine is finely tuned and we can do HIIT where lots of fat is supplying the energy, then it's great, and it's ideal for having that stress that we adapt to in the recovery period, and we build a stronger, bigger engine ultimately. So, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling on about the importance of both, but context is key.
So it's building that base as that aerobic engine with the lower max aerobic function type of aerobic development, and then when to add in the HIIT type of training. So why don't you talk about the HIIT Science and what that means? Is it like 20, 30 second intervals, or what do we need to do, when, why, and how?
Well, again,
1 hour.
I know. And everyone just wants a simple answer, right?
I know. It depends.
And it does unfortunately depend. What are you training for? Like, what are you all about? Like if you are training for if you're training for an Ironman triathlon, you want a kind of a combination of, good fat burning engine, but you also actually want some VO2 max too. So you want a little bit of both. How do you get your VO2 max, which is your maximal oxygen consumption? There's lots of different ways that you can kind of do that, right? You can, one of the ways that you can kind of pump that up a bit. And I think we spoke about this on our first podcast, Debbie, and that was basically, we're looking at these work bouts that are above your threshold, and for periods of time that cause the heart rate to beat towards, at least above 90% of its maximum. And when we're doing this, we're getting a larger stretch our myocardium. We're getting a larger cardiac output. So stroke volume is towards maximal. Cardiac output is towards maximal. And the response is a larger heart that's going to be able to pump more oxygen to the working muscle. So that's why it's kind of, it is good to kind of hit that nail with your hammer in the week, potentially once if you have that base first. So that's why it's good to get that kind of stress in there as well. Components of both of these are going to leverage performance in almost every sport, whether you're doing, whether it's a triathlon, whether it's a cycle race, whether it's a run, whether it's an ultra run, like you want sort of components of all of these things. The other one is the fast twitch fibers too, right? So one of the things is, we've got these slow twitch muscle fibers, which do the majority of our work kind of during the day is to cause for various different functions, but we're also equipped with larger, more powerful fast twitch muscle fibers that are very important for doing hard work, right? They're also important for, all of a sudden, if you've got to, keep your balance up or prevent a fall, you've got to quickly go in and use these. You don't want to lose them. And they do go to sleep in our life, right? So you're talking about, being healthy and strong all your life. Well, you don't want to lose those either, right? So again, once in your week, it's good to be able to hit those larger fast twitch muscle fibers. And you can do that through your HIIT training, short and sharp sort of stuff. Or you can do that in the gym as well, or maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah. So how do you know when you need to add in that HIIT training? So, you hear about the Maffetone likes people to do like the monthly test to see if you're not improving, then you add it in. Do you have a kind of a template to suggest people, all right, you're doing that low heart rate training, you need to add in speed work if you're not getting any faster?
Yeah, I think again, it's context, but it's like, I think you're starting to feel, it'll come with some confidence. Like, it's like, okay, yeah, you know what? I've done the math kind of work for a good couple of weeks. I'm starting to feel sort of confident. And one of the things that you should be noticing when the math sort of base work is starting to work is that your speed or power output at the same lower heart rate is rising naturally, right? This is what's happening in your body when you see this is that your mitochondria, the machinery that's burning the substrates, fat and carbohydrate, it's becoming more efficient, and it's actually using more fat as a fuel, and it's outputting more ATP or the energy molecule, and efficiency is ultimately better. So you're seeing this in terms of better work output. You're going faster, you're pushing more power, and you're doing it easier too, at the same heart rate and the same sort of feel. Yeah. That's the time when you might start to add the HIIT work, or at least up your pace a little bit. Okay, let's rev the engine a little bit, and let's sort of see if we can, get a little bit more out of the engine, and let's see how that feels, and let's see how my recovery heart rate is in that period as well. So it's very feel-based, it's very context-based. There's no absolute. Unfortunately, there's just no absolute formula, because it's really going to come down to that individual. That individual that we started with that has their heart rate screaming high. And, again, I'm reflecting on the example that Phil gave me in my recent podcast. He had a guy that he couldn't actually walk a single lap of the treadmill, a single lap of a 400 meter track without his heart rate going. He really had to slow him down, right? It was just, even just a fast walk was too much for him. So he had to kind of walk, stop. So this is the situation. Like, we might be that far back, and that's okay. But if you're there, like, just really keep your heart rate super, super low. Stop if you have to. So there's all these contexts, right? But then we could be talking about your elite triathlete as well. That's right up there, but still also needs to slow down first before they should speed up, because they're not burning their fuels efficiently. So yeah, context.
Yeah, so true. So what if you find someone that's not improving? They still, they'll keep the lower heart rate training numbers, but they're going a 12, 13-minute mile pace, and they've been working at this for months. And I know I listened to you guys on Dr. Bubb's podcast recently, and it's kind of what I've talked about for 10 years, the holistic method, that stress impacts everything, their sleep and all these other factors. So yeah, it depends. And if it's different stressors like insulin resistance, and what are some signs and symptoms of someone that's got something else going on? If they're doing this, say, training at 130 heart rate, and they're still running at a 13-minute mile pace, which is probably a run walk, and they've been doing it for 6 months and they're not making progress.
Yeah. And that's a really, really frustrating for those individuals. And unfortunately, the hard and fast likely answer, I mean, no one knows it all, right? And everyone's an individual, but there's probably still stressors in that person's life that they haven't cracked. Yeah. And, we're finding more and more about these, added stressors that are out there in our world that they're just so invisible, and who knows what they could be. But it ranges from, the aluminum levels that are, being really probably, very slowly leaked into the systems, basically from various different sorts of levels, in the food source, glyphosate, which is like it's basically in so many things that are non-GMO sort of foods. Even unfortunately the Wi-Fi and the 5G could be affecting certain individuals. And on it kind of goes, right? Like there's unfortunately, there's a lot of invisible, insidious stressors that are, the more I'm kind of redoing my research into the peer-reviewed work, it's not just conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, they're really there. So you haven't cracked it. Keep looking at it. Look down some of these other rabbit holes, and don't give up. But these are the fundamental principles. Is like stress in some form is still too high because we haven't cracked it.
Yeah. And that's why last time I saw you, I was studying for my exams for FDN practitioner. So I could do functional lab testing, be a health investigator, and help athletes be fit and healthy from the inside out, because there's all these external stressors like the glyphosate, heavy metals in our environment, the Wi-Fi, 5G, but also just stress in life. But then all these hidden internal stressors that we call hidden, stands for hormone, immune dysfunction, digestion, detoxification, energy, and nervous system. And I just love tying this all together, this comprehensive coaching program, to look at, okay, what's going on? Let's do lab testing. If you're not getting results, spend money on that, because it is expensive. Mm-hmm. But, if you're not making progress, I'd rather just invest in my health now instead of spending, like I spent 8 years trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So it's like, do you want a short-term or long-term plan and get answers, but you don't know? We always say test and not guess what's actually going on. We're not getting results from, if you've been doing the heart rate training, and you can talk too about heart rate variability, how that will give you some indication of stressors of your body, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, heart rate variability is a great one to monitor. There's lots of various non-invasive ways that you can get at that. Heart rate variability, of course, we're actually looking at the variation in the heartbeat to beat. And ultimately, we've got the two levels of the nervous system. You've got your sympathetic system, fight or flight, stress, and you've got your parasympathetic system, rest and digest, feed and breed. And this is we want to have kind of a balance of those two. So HIIT training, of course, is a big stressor associated with the sympathetic nervous system, at least a little bit. And then after that, we need to balance into the parasympathetic system, and kind of, it's there to heal us ultimately. And yeah, that's and heart rate variability is a way. It's not black or white, but it's just like it's good to sort of see where your balance is kind of is happening. And we can do this non-invasively. There's so many different ways that we can kind of look into this. Marco Altini's HRV for training, just measured on the tip of your finger. There's other different wearables that are out there. There's the Oura Ring, the Whoop Band. There you go. I mean, so there's so many of these kind of ways that you could track these now to get a picture and a look at how you're tracking, and that might give you some more insight into these things that you can pull back and push forward on in your life, all the various different ones, whether you're manipulating sleep, you're changing a little bit in your diet, trying out some HIIT training versus MAF training, all these sorts of things.
So when you add in HIIT training to go with your 80%, you're doing the low heart rate, you say you're doing 20% HIIT training, how do you monitor it to know if it's effective? Like, what are you looking at with people, their athletes, if they're getting faster overall, or how do you monitor that in their endurance training?
Yeah. So I would do, there's, I guess, a few different ways. And I'll do a shameless plug because I'm thinking about it right now for my AI training system that I've been forming for a long time called Athletica. Mm-hmm. And it's basically some of the things that we look at in Athletica thereafter is we ask, how did the session feel? And was it was it hard? And, or like you can basically use like a rating of perceived exertion type scale. Mm-hmm. So you can actually, and then, does that session, was it hard but good? Like, or hard but feel good, or hard but feel kind of crappy? And, if it was hard, a whole session that's hard but crappy, that's completely giving you some different information than if it was hard and feeling good, right? Like a good HIIT session, it feels hard, but it feels really, really kind of good, right? And that's another indicator that you're doing it right. That's like your body is meeting the demands of that. And I think everyone that's listening has probably had, or most of us have had sort of both experiences, right? Where you prescribe something that's challenging and it feels really good, and then sometimes you prescribe something that's challenging and your brain's just like, I don't want to go do that. Yeah. I can't do that. It's just feeling awful. So yeah, those are sort of some of the signs and ways you can kind of, get into these things. But ultimately, yeah, back to that whole balance. You want a balance of those sorts of, those stressors that are in life. And there's various different guides that are out there, including Athletica, that can allow you to go and achieve that.
Huh. So one more question there on the HIIT to know, I think we were talking about on our fitness panel Saturday, there's 6 of us on the panel and people ask questions for an hour. And it's a lot of people I hear asking questions about, how to get the best results, minimal dose. And I think with HIIT training comes to mind is people don't go hard to make it effective. How hard do you need to go to make yourself get results? Like HIIT training means to me, like go all out for 30 seconds, use my heart rate monitor, try to get to 160 heart rate, for example, versus others that may not use a heart rate monitor, or they don't feel comfortable pushing themselves. They don't know. It's like lifting weights. We're saying so many people just go easy. They're afraid to get that little edge. So those that aren't good at pushing themselves, because some people are the opposite, right? They always push too hard every workout. So what are some tips to guide people on how hard you should go?
Yeah, that's a great one. So you should always leave a session like you could have done one or two more. That's one of the key ones. And, this is, you're really alluding to the whole, when most people think about HIIT training, they're thinking about the typical CrossFit, no pain, no gain type attitude. And that's, unfortunately, that's not the way it should go. It just shouldn't be. It's not about no pain, no gain. It's about hitting your target and walking away. So again, we're doing this HIIT workout for the reasons that we led off with in the conversation. We're doing this to get a quick stimulus of the heart because we know that's good. So it can hit high stroke volumes, high cardiac output, enlarge and maintain its basic function as younger us, where you're maintaining VO2 max. Because remember, VO2 max diminishes as we age. We want to keep that up there for as long as we can. Same with the fast twitch fibers. We want to hit those targets and then walk away. So we still want to hit them, but we don't want to overhit them, because when we overhit them or hit them for too long, catecholamines spit out, cortisol spits out. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid, lots of sugar, and we're basically creating a bad situation again. So yeah, I think those are fundamental, things people can think about. Is if I'm doing a HIIT session, I got to turn the tap off when I could do at least 2 more of these things. It's like, that's enough. I hit my target, I walk away. And again, back to Athletica, this is sort of the guidelines that we've got on this, basically it's for both athletes and coaches, but it's a prescribing tool for HIIT, based on the person's parameters, that always allows for that. We're always erring, and all coaches should do this too, always erring on the lower end, the minimal effective dose that you just said. That's really what we should be all aiming for, not the no pain, no gain. That does not work long term. And you're talking about longevity. We've got to do this target hitting approach, or we get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah. Well, that's what I talk a lot about that. And as I said, I turned 50, so I'm all, changing, not blaming. I hate the excuse, I'm getting older, I can't do that, I'm slower. But I would say you're embracing the aging process and adjusting. I'm not going to train the same way at 50 as I did when I was 25, 30 years old. So I need to adjust and course correct and change the way I'm doing I'm not racing for anything right now, but if I decide to race, or I'm not even racing, I just feel like to get faster running is my goal. And so I need to change it instead of just doing slow stuff all the time. How important it is as I get older. I feel like I just intuitively know I need more interval stuff and less long, slow stuff. It just feels like I change more, but I think it's looking at when you're aging, it's not going to be, you can't, insanity, doing the same routine over and over again, expecting different results, when you need to make adjustments, push pause and reset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that intuition you just spoke on too, Deb, is really important. Like you've got, you're listening to your body, and you're feeling like you need to do more high intensity work. You're probably right. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's really, and again, we're all on this journey and whatnot, but for all of us, we really need to kind of listen in and become in tune with what our body's telling us to do. That's
where your HRV training comes in, right? I mean, wouldn't you use that to know, okay, did I do too much? Did I do too little? How's my recovery? Because I couldn't believe how many people yesterday in my seminar don't use heart rate monitor or know what HRV training is. We've been talking about this forever, but I think there's a lot of new people doing endurance sports. Like, oh my gosh, this is key to your training and figuring out how to best approach everything.
Yeah, totally. But remember, everyone, you might be at a certain level and you're totally into all these things, but not every person that comes to you, like, they might just be picking this stuff up for the very first time. Yeah. And that's, because not, everyone only has so much bandwidth to gather information in their lives, and we're all we're all on a different pathway and stuff. So we just have to appreciate that, and and be ready to meet individuals wherever they're.
I always say that. That's so true with clients. I've said that for years with personal training clients and athletes. We meet you where you're at, and it's important. Exactly. And you get, just working part-time in Ben Greenfield coaching program for 10 years, 2 of his coaches program, listen to all his stuff, and his listeners, they are the biohacking community, all this stuff. So it's like, oh yeah, reality, those aren't the normal people that are out there, the athletes that are going to use all these different devices and spend all this money on recovery hacks and the PEMF mats and all this stuff. And I'll get clients like, are you using this? Are you using that? Like, what is that? So it's reality that's not normal. Yeah. So I want to dive into the other big topic we were talking about in the seminar, and talking to S Fuels and Zach Bitter a little bit, and Endure Dr. Dan Plews too. You guys matching the fueling and training. So have you kind of looked at that at all with your coaching program and the HIIT Science? Are you looking at nutrition? You mentioned a little bit. How do you work nutrition with the training?
Yeah, Phil's really, with HIIT Science, Phil's really kind of, he teaches the chapter 7 on the nutrition and health. We've really gone to him mostly on that. I think there's many ways to skin a cat when it comes to the nutrition there as well, right? And again, so much is context based. You've got, on the one hand, you definitely want to be, I guess, fueling for the work that's required. There's kind of a saying, and that can come from a variety of, fat or carbohydrate, depending on the context. That could include fasted training in the right context. But it doesn't mean, you're kind of doing that all the time, right? Like I think it's very similar to what we were describing with with the different types of MAF training versus HIIT training. It can be the same sort of thing with fasted training versus fueled training. I don't think there's a one, a one size fits all kind of philosophy. So, and again, this is coming from the context. I've coached many different athletes, but from Andy Buscher, who's one of the best triathletes in the world, he'll do a fasted training session, right? So he'll wake up in the morning and he knows he's going to do 5 to 7 hours fasted, and he can do that, but he's built up to that. He hasn't done that overnight. That in another context, that might just be, doing 45 minutes. That might be enough for a person, right? So, and then they'll eat, but there's advantages in that fasted kind of fueling context. There's advantages to pushing the fat burning. And then you fuel right after that. And of course you're fueling to meet the energy demands of the sort of the whole day too. And so much comes back, in my opinion, Debbie, to what I was speaking about with you before, and that's listening and really listening to the body. So it's like, okay, what does my body want? And a lot of times it's right, but you need to be very clear on that, the messages that the body is telling you. Do I really want a sugar hit? Like, do I really want to go into that fridge and like find a Gatorade or something like that? Is that really what I need? Or do I need something a little bit more like like an apple, sort of a slower releasing kind of sugar fix, if so to speak, kind of thing. So it's education. Again, speaking back, I'm reflecting on the conversation with Phil, because I asked him, well, how, so many of these things are addiction dependent, and sugar can be a real addiction sort of problem. I said, well, how do you break that addiction? And he said, well, it's education. You've got to start to learn about the types of fuels that you want to have in your body versus those that you don't. So you don't probably want to pull the Gatorade. You want to pull the apple or the more complex type of carbohydrates if you're having that sort of sugar craving, right? So what's a natural food that you could sort of have there in that context? Or could you, can we think about a sort of more an animal-based type fueling products, right? Could you pull a piece of cold steak or could you make some eggs? These types of things. So it really, and so much kind of depends on the individual and what they've just done.
Well, so going back to the fasted exercise, because a lot of people are doing this and there's a lot of different opinions out there, female versus male as well. And when you're doing a fasted workout, so you get up in the morning and you're going to do a run or bike ride, do you have kind of guidelines where you want your athletes to stick, like no more than overnight fasting, 12 to 15 hours, make sure at the dinner before you're having some good healthy carbohydrates in there instead of just only protein fat? Do you have any kind of ideas of what you like people to do when they should fuel or not fuel, if they're doing
I actually don't, but I don't have any general, I'm trying to think, like, do I, I don't know. I find in my years, and I'm almost reflecting, this is almost like 12 years, I guess, I've been sort of going through various different individuals, and I just find it's so individual. Like it's just there's so many different types that are sort of out there, and I know what I like, and I but that's my own bias, right? So I have to be really careful about providing my bias to other sorts of people. I know what works for me. And I like to move my diet around as well with sort of how I'm feeling. I would say my diet has sort of evolved to be shifting into being a little bit more animal based. And I'm very particular now with the types of products that I have. I've really moved to so I'm coming at you from a sort of like interior of British Columbia in the farm fields and whatnot. I know exactly where to source my my animals, right? So I almost know the animals that I'm consuming, right? Like
Daisy the cow, and you have your
and that close to home, right? The farmer's market, like everything is just so local, and it's like and I can't tell you how much it makes a difference. And just like there's no way any of this is GMO, because I know where it's coming from. I know the ground. I see it. Like it's very sort of old school, but that's sort of where I've kind of shifted in terms of things. And it's very farm based. Farm to table, kind of, and then once that's there, there's almost going by feel, and like it's really listening to what my body needs in the time. But in general, it's kind of, I'm still kind of doing two meals a day in terms of large meals. So I'm kind of doing a start eating about 1 o'clock, and it'll be a solid feed at 1 o'clock, and then another solid feed around 6 o'clock. But it's like my morning period is time for activity. It's mostly fasted, but not fully. Like sometimes if I feel like I kind of need something whole foodish with my, I might have a black coffee and there's some cherries. I had some cherries.
Well, you're in the Okanagan. You guys have the best cherries. I remember as a kid.
Right. So it just kind of picked me up, and I just helped me along with my my morning workout. So yeah.
But that's because we've been doing this for 20 years, whatever. I think it's hard to teach people. It takes time to get that intuitive feeling, and I think I keep talking and to myself and for my athletes and my podcast is that to know when am I causing more stress and harm than benefit if I don't eat or eat. So really playing around with that. All right, if I have just black coffee, which I don't do often because I like a little something, so that having a little collagen and mushroom adaptogens in my coffee, a little cream, versus just being so strict, because so many of us athletes, I think, are that type A, AAA driven, high charging individual that they'll take these guidelines like fasted exercise and they are so strict like I used to be. Now I'm like, now I'm more intuitive instead of just following these guidelines that they think that are, that you have to do that exactly, not listen to, okay, you are an individual. You need to adjust this as a template, start here and then tweak it and course correct, but when to eat and when not to eat, and listening to your body like, oh, I'm hungry. Do I honor that and eat? Or do I just push through it and go, okay, I'm not going to eat till, like I used to go all day and not eat till 3 o'clock, but I also like swam and I ran with a client and I lifted weights and I was training clients. And I feel like that was a additional source of stress because I was doing too much. So it's like that fine line of the Goldilocks effect of, how much is too much and too long of fasting and not eating enough as an athlete, as well as getting enough protein in as we do more keto, carnivore, whatever you want to call it, trying to hit our macros of protein in, listening to Dr. Gabrielle Leon's science and, all these people talking, get your protein in as athletes, but you can't do that if you're just eating one meal a day, you don't get enough nutrition in. Yeah.
But I think it really kind of comes down to the whole, like we're all N of one experiments. Each person listening to this, you're you, and it's up to you. You need to take your own sort of responsibility. Use some of these general guidelines. Like, so I would have, and you probably the same, where it's like, okay, let's play with this whole fasted training till, if we're going to have one meal a day, let's see if we can do that. And let's see what that feels like. And then, or let's try 2 meals a day. Like I'm just kind of my general thing, but then let's tweak from there as well. And, oh, you know what? I'm actually a little bit more sharp and on point when I have a couple handful of cherries or whatever it's going to be. Or if I have, a hard boiled egg and stuff, and just get those amino acids in there. So, it's just, I really just think you are an N of 1 experiment. Play your, run your experiment, figure out what works with you. It's going to change. Be accepting of that. And keep going. See what tomorrow brings.
Well, that's what I was saying in the seminar I gave yesterday. It's like, sorry, I don't have exact answer. It depends. It's N equals 1 experiment. Here's some suggestions for male athletes, female athletes, but take it and then adjust. But do you have I think people are afraid of not burning fat when they're exercising. They want to see nutritional ketosis, and they think that they need to do their workouts and show some ketones, and afraid of carbs. And so what would you say on like the science of fat oxidation, and when you're fasted versus eating versus like, do I take ketones, or is it okay to take some carbs, and what kind of anything in that area of people, should they burn fat, have ketones, or does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think the jury is really still out on the whole ketones things and the ketone supplementation. I mean, one thing like just really basic that we have to kind of, if we take the Google Earth helicopter view on that whole thing, you're adding in something, you're biohacking and you're adding in something that really hasn't existed before, right? We haven't been consuming oral ketones in our lives until now with these various different things. So we sort of got to question that from a fundamental standpoint. Yeah, I get it. I've done it. It's interesting. I know I can get my BHB levels up to 5 if I want if I'm using the right product. Is that necessarily, do I need that? Have I had that in the past? Am I going to be better? I just don't know. Right. Like, and no one does. We're all kind of guessing on those things. So this is where I'm kind of going back to the whole holistic Paul, and like, it's like, okay, well, I can't be too wrong if I'm living around the farms here, knowing the farmers, going to the markets, really going back to just really trying to be as basic as I can with that, trying to avoid some of the heavy metals if I can, avoid some of the glyphosates if I can, being careful on my Wi-Fi stuff as well, because radiation, there's studies that show radiation's not a great thing. So all these sorts of things. And I don't know, babbling on here.
Well, I just get the
this is my own N of 1 experiment. I'm talking you through my experiment.
Well, we have a group that I'm kind of help with, Keto Endurance on Facebook group page. My friend Stephanie Holbrook started, and people ask all the time. They say what their goals are, and their goals to keep in ketosis while they're training. Like, I mean, my goal is to burn fat. Do you really need to be in ketosis and show ketones from the way you're fueling, not taking in ketones? But they just think they should be nutritional ketosis, which does it really matter?
Well, I don't know. I mean, so I can see Stephanie's point because...
Well, not Stephanie, but people in our group ask that all the time.
Sure. Well, if we look to some of Dom Delastigo's kind of work and whatnot, we look at some of the signaling properties of, mechanistically on high levels of BHB. And there seems to be some sort of aging relevance there, which, in a positive light. Maybe from a theoretical sort of standpoint, but again, I just go back to basics first. And do you really know like what it's almost like it's the same sort of problem as like a cortisol. Cortisol is so fluctuating, right? All through the day. You might take a marker of cortisol and it might be totally different an hour later. And I think it's going to be the same for your BHB. And I think if you're paying that much like granular focus on a single molecule, you're kind of losing how complex we are as human beings. Like, there's so many other things that we can kind of look at. So I just, with all of these things, even HRV and all these things, it's been great for my own N01 experiment to go down all these various different rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, I kind of come back to being just as broad, holistic sort of coach. And it's just not, I just don't want to be hyper-focused on a single sort of variable. But back to I think I'm just kind of reflecting on one of your questions, the importance of fat oxidation. Definitely. So fat is one of the 3 macronutrients. I guess the 4th could be ketone, but really fat is a big player. And the better you are at burning fat. Think about the overfat pandemic that Phil and I kind of talk about. Yeah. And it's fat is if you have too much of it, it's a problem, and it's indicative of so many, or it's going to be related to many of the chronic illnesses that we see, such as cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's and dementia, cancers, diabetes, etc. Right? So you want to have the right amount of fat. You don't want to be under fat. You don't want to be over fat. Over fat's the larger problem. So your ability to burn that is really darn important. So this is an important variable that we need to kind of, focus on if we had to kind of pick one. So that's something we need to pay attention to. But all these things that we've spoken on, the balance of the MAF training is the major player with a little bit of high intensity in it. The nutrition source that you're taking in, so key. And again, there's sabotagers that are out there we've spoken on. And then stress is the big one too, right? So the key one is stress. Stress can sabotage the whole system because of, again,
I'm a good example of that.
the cortisol. So,
yeah.
So sorry, go on.
No, I was saying that's I'm the example of that. That's what my purpose is now to, teach people the chronic stress, because that's why I can't race anymore. I broke myself since 2013. It's come on, stress impacts all of the efforts that we're talking about.
Well, it does. Yeah. Cause it's so systemic. It targets the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, HPA axis, right? That's central. And that's the guy that's controlling the balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems we spoke of. So if that's out of whack, then everything's going to be out of whack, and your fat burning goes out of whack as well, right? So it's driving that too with cortisol. So
last question, and I know we got to wrap up, but with fueling, when you're doing, say, a 3-hour bike ride or longer, or someone's doing a long run, do you have carb timing there? Are you giving them fat fuel or something like S fuels or Vespa? What type of suggestions do you like for your athletes to when they should take in fuel?
Yeah. So this is one. So in the coaching context, I'll be talking it through with them. Really. It's what do you do? Right. What do you like to do? And then kind of go from there. But if their answer is, I think I'm going to have 5, maybe, or 3 gels an hour and a little bit of Gatorade. I was okay, can we pull back on that in that context? And then on the other hand, it's if I'm talking to Andy, it's can we do that ride fasted? And it's yeah, no problem. So it's very sort of context dependent, but if in my mind, if we're having sugar, with lots of fructose, et cetera, that's not probably a great sort of solution. I like a product. I'm just not big on the products. I'm old school, but if you're going to have a banana or an apple, and then that's more my style. And even a hand, some homemade crushed, almonds into some sort of a homemade kind of bar or whatnot in that. I like those sorts of things too. So I'm real old school when it comes to that. I'm all about kind of slowly releasing the fuels into the body and in a blend of, ideally in a blend of complex carbohydrates and a little bit of fat and protein in it. So, and
drink salt in your water, or do you get electrolytes for beverage?
I'm not. Dan Plews actually wrote a really good one on EndurIQ. He just showed me the other day. So check that out. It should be up. But basically, he was talking about salt and salt is a whole can of worms, and the industry is big on it. But there's really no evidence that does much of anything. So there's no peer-reviewed information out there that actually does anything, right? And you got to think of, why is that? Well, it's because it's a very tightly regulated electrolyte in the blood, right? So your kidneys, your whole kidney and skin's job is to regulate that that cation in the bloodstream, right? And it does a very good job tightly regulating that, at least from the blood standpoint. Should you have it after? Absolutely. It's a key one but you're getting it from, when we talk about like some of the animal products and stuff, like think about if you're consuming like a bunch of red meat after, think of how much sodium you're getting in that. Like that's true sodium that you're taking in the body and storing in the rest of the body. And Tim Noakes says, we've probably got lots of salt reserves that are littered throughout the body. The best resource on this is the book Waterlogged by Tim Noakes. Yeah, he really kind of goes into it. Fantastic stuff also on the electrolyte distribution in the I think is in this, like in the stomach from the pancreas itself. And it's almost like why are we even concerning ourselves with sodium? Because it's a drop in the ocean relative to the sodium load that's kind of flowing through the GI tract that I think it's a bile duct that's dumping it in there kind of on a regular sort of basis. And then ultimately, even if you're having like a Gatorade type or a super salty type drink, you're diluting the amount of sodium that's actually in there. That's what people it's hard to explain because you're having this real salty kind of, drink, say, but you're actually in the dilution factor. You're still diluting it in your whole body. And this is why you can get hyponatremia, low sodium in your body with just having like salt products or like Gatorade type products in like a long distance kind of event. So this is why, and this is really kind of going to the whole premise of why Tim was so passionate about this area and why he wrote Waterlogged, because he was like, people were killing themselves basically by consuming too much Gatorade in Ironman events, thinking that it would prevent hyponatremia, which can result in hyponatremic encephalopathy. So it's brain swelling causing death, and it cannot. So it's like, you really got to be careful of this. It's intuitively, you think you're helping your system and putting in more salt, but you're not. You're actually putting in more water, and you can destroy yourself.
Interesting. Because at KetoCon, all 3 days, everyone's talking about adding in salt. Low carb keto people are talking, eat salt.
Well, I would say eat salt. So then it's back to the steak. So have think or steak or some bacon or these sorts of things, right? So
olives.
Have it in real food, absolutely. But that's how you get it. You don't get it from a product. I'm sorry, you just
have some pickle juice.
Sure, pickle juice is fine. Yeah, exactly. I'd like to see. I haven't really seen. And there was one product that came out, and they claimed to have some data that showed an alleviation of the cramping reflex with this product. It was almost like chili pepper kind of stuff, I think. Do you remember that?
Well, Rob Wolf, have you tried LMNT? They have the different sodium, magnesium, potassium ones, but I don't know the other products. LMNT and Real-Lite, Redmond Real-Lite as their drink mix, but that's kind of what everyone's talking about at the conference. Redmond's Real Salt. 5 to 15 grams.
Right. Just keep in mind the cramping response is a reflex, right? And it's basically, you're pushing yourself too hard relative to what your muscle loop can kind of handle, right? That's why you're cramping. You're not cramping because you're low in salt, even though that's what the industries will try to tell you that's happening. But that's not how it works, right? It just doesn't. The key data is from Schwennessen et al. In forget what I think he's shown it back even as far as 97, I think, or maybe it was 07, maybe it was 2007. But basically, it was showing the evidence in the post cramp surveys in like Ironman triathletes, people basically pushing beyond their threshold, or like they had ambitions to perform a lot better than they actually were capable of, and they were the ones that were really cramping. So if you're going too hard, which makes a lot of sense too, right? If you're going hard relative to your capabilities, you're going to be cramping. And that's a body's mechanism of kind of trying to hold you back. It's like, I'm not capable of this. I need to shut this system down. So yeah, it's not, and we think, we can't counter that with, consuming more salt, despite the number of nutritionists that are out there that are going to tell you that that's the solution. The solution is you need to train better the next time.
That's true. So I guess one bonus question, do you have anything to add on to differences between men and women and the female athlete training for fueling and training and fasting and all that? Like Dr. Stacy Sims says one thing and other people say other things, fasted or not, and females going too low carb.
Yeah, no, I don't follow the logic behind what she's talking there. And if someone can explain it to me, please do. But basically, I mean, I don't know really where she's going. Like, we're all human beings at the end of the day. I recognize that there's different, gonadal systems that are involved, and the HPA axis connects to the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axes. Mm-hmm. But I don't see how that key difference relates to anything from a fueling standpoint. I think whether you're male or female and you're still looking within yourself, there's still a man or a woman in that internal person that's able to listen and know whether or not they need that fuel or not. So I have, world-beating female athletes that I coach that can very much handle a fasted workout, no problem. So I won't name names and stuff, but these are some of the best triathletes in the world, and we go through the time of month, etc. And that actually having a regular period is a very important litmus test for me, marker that we have that athlete as a healthy athlete. So it's a fundamental sign for me. It's the same as male athletes too. If we're training male athletes and they're not waking up with a heart on, then we've got a problem too, right? There's very similar
hormones.
Things too. Yeah, exactly. It's really important that the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis is functioning optimally as well. And we can use that as a tool to know that we are a healthy athlete.
As well as thyroid too, right? Because it goes thyroid, adrenals, gonads.
That's right. But if I've got a regular period in my female athlete that I'm coaching, and then we're good, then we're happy, and we can play around with some fasted training as well. But we're like, again, from a coaching standpoint, we're asking good questions as a coach, and we're right in tune. We're working with that athlete to make sure that they're listening, and regular communication with that athlete, can ensure that, they are, comments like, oh, I'm just, eating the house down after that workout, blah, 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 even if it's fasted. And these are the kind of things. And when I'm seeing that, and they're using the same types of, dietary principles that we've spoken in this podcast with whole natural foods, I'm happy. And that athlete's happy. And, I've got winning athletes, so I'm happy.
Well, I'm working on, mapping out the hormones, your exercise, and your fueling plan for the female cycle. And listening to Dr. Mindy Pelz has kind of did all this, and looking at Dan Plews in his Endure program, we did one little segment on the female athlete. So I'm trying to map it out and create a chart. So then when I'm training female athletes, I can look at, okay, when's your day one, and map out their training program that way, and experiment with that data and see if we can kind of optimize their performance and recovery repair based on their schedule. So it's kind of getting into it. So
for sure. And I mean, this is such a great topic, actually, the differences in the gender. And I had Julia Casadillo on my podcast, and she was the performance physiologist for New Zealand Olympic program for both the Rio and the Tokyo Games, most successful games for the New Zealand program. Julia also did the HIIT course in Dan Plews and Endure IQ.
She did the female athlete one, right?
That's right. She did, right?
Yeah.
So she was on the podcast, and she was, we were talking actually about gender differences in the heat acclimation thing. Yeah. So just to be clear, I'm very well aware that there are gender differences, but these are in Julia's words as well. It's like, you are going to see females that adapt just like a male. But then, if we are going to generalize, there's like a slower adaptation response in heat acclimation, say, for example, in females versus males, but it's not across the line. It's just, a male can sort of have a classic female phenotypic, type response in the heat acclimation. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the same with anything. It's probably going to be the same with the fueling as well, right? If there's one thing that we've spoken about at length in this podcast, is it does come down, we are all individuals. Context is key. Yeah. What is it in you? Like, listen to yourself. What's working for you, or what isn't working for you? You're N of one experiment. How are you going to tweak things, and are you going to play with things?
Yep. That's why I do personalized coaching. I can't do the group programs because I can't help people. Like, you guys are all different. I can't just give everyone one program. So I appreciate that. So where can people learn more about your program in Athletica? What can we do with that? Share that program with everyone.
For sure.
Your HIIT Science.
Yeah. So I think like your audience might, like, if you're looking for so Athletica is basically an online AI coach kind of plan for both athletes and coaches. We've got a coach version now as well. And basically, Stephanie's actually tinkering with it and using it. So really appreciate a shout out to her. And basically it's just like, if you've got a cycling, running, or triathlon race, you plug in your date, and basically it's boom, 7 months out, here's your guide based on you as an individual out to that race. And that's at athletica.ai. That's the main thing that I'm kind of working on these days. There's also HIITscience.com as well, if you're interested in learning about the intricacies of HIITs, and it's an online HIIT resource. And then finally, we're on Discord as well. We're actually doing for both Athletica and HIIT. We've got kind of like a Discord community for coaches and athletes. So check us out. It's called the Training Science Experts, and you can see us on Discord as well, all free.
Cool. Yeah, I've been finding that I'm being pulled back into the endurance world. I was, I closed my fitness studio when I saw you last, 2019, and last 2 years, COVID, just working on all this stuff. But now it's like, what gets me excited is this stuff and these topics. Like, okay, this is where I need to stay in my lane of endurance athletes, metabolic efficiency, and really helping people perform their best in the N=1 training. This is what I love to do. So that's kind of what we've focused on this podcast, even though we've had it 10 years ago. We started Fit, Fat, Fast. And now I think people are listening a little bit more and curious and wanting to learn more. So thanks for sharing the science behind it and your insight, because you're brilliant and always on the cusp of research. And I leave it up to you guys to do the research and tell me. Too much time.
Such important work, Debbie. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Keep up the great work, and all the best to all your listeners out there.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.